Okay, so hey, what's up guys? Today I'm gonna be going over how to do a Star Wars crawl in CSS and HTML. The Star Wars crawl is basically the text that you see at the beginning of Star Wars movies that will quickly summarize the events that lead up to the movie. So I'll refresh my page to show you another time an example. People who are fans of Star Wars obviously know this. In case you are not, well, this is what I mean when I say Star Wars crawl. Yeah, so basically you get the idea. If you find this interesting, I'm gonna be going over a step-by-step tutorial on how to do this effect in CSS and HTML. Okay, so what we're gonna need is first of all the Star Wars logo. I went on the internet and looked it up. I downloaded this Star Wars.svg logo with a black background. We also need like the actual text that's gonna be scrolling on screen. I also went on the internet and looked it up, and here it is. I copied it in my project folder in a text file. And then a color picker, which is pretty much an application that lets you upload an image and then extract the color encoding of any color in the picture. I'm gonna be needing this application so that I can assign the text on screen the same color of the Star Wars logo. Anyway, I'll be linking the website that I used in the description. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, we have an index.html file. I'm gonna use !enter to fill it with boilerplate. And then I'm gonna start making a container, a div with a class of container. And I'll also make a style section at the top of the document. I'll target the container class and give it a background of black. I'll also give it a height of 100 view height so that it fills the whole screen. Now I need to remove the margins here that are given by the body element. So I'll target the body element and do a margin of 0. The next thing, I'm gonna do a div with a class of titles. And this is where I'm gonna have my crawl text. Also use another div inside of it. So inside the other div that I created inside titles, I'm gonna make 3 paragraphs. So in each paragraph element, I'll be putting a paragraph from the Star Wars opening text. Okay, so in case you're asking yourself, we already have a div with a class of title, and why am I using another div inside of it? So we'll have like the titles div responsible for the change in orientation, while the div that's inside of the titles div is going to be responsible for making the text move to the top of the screen. Okay, so let's see how that will work. Let's target the titles div and change the color of the text, because at the moment it's black and we can't see it yet. And as we said, we will use the website that lets you extract colors from an image. And here is the color encoding of the yellow that makes up the Star Wars logo. I'm gonna be using the same color for my text. Okay, so now that we changed the color, next thing we're gonna do is change the font size. We give it a larger font size, so I don't know, 3 rem. Let's see how that looks. It's a little bit too big. I'll go for 2.5 rem. Okay, that's better. Now let's shape the titles div in the shape of a column. I'll set the width to 500 pixels and let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks fine for now. Maybe we'll have to change it later, but we can work with this for now. I'll just change the margins and set them to auto, which will center the text. So margin 0 for vertical margins and auto for horizontal margins. Okay. Okay, next thing we want to do is apply 2 transforms to this titles div that will make it look like the text is leaning back into the screen, which gives you the effect that the Star Wars crawl is going for pretty much, which is the text scrolling into the depths of the screen. And we will see what 2 transformations we will apply. The first thing we're gonna do is have a rotation on the x-axis. A rotation on the x-axis will make it look like the top part of the text is leaning back into the screen while the bottom part of the text is coming out of the screen, or at least it's supposed to give you this impression. So I'll go for 25 degrees rotation on the x-axis, and you kind of see what it does. I'll just try like also 35 to see how it looks. I think 25 looked better. Okay, next thing we want to do is apply another transformation, and that is a change in perspective. A change in perspective makes it seem like you walked away from the screen. It's kind of like getting far away from the screen. And rotation on the x-axis plus the change in perspective enhance each other. So let's see how that works. I'll immediately go for perspective of 300 pixels. You can see even more the x-axis rotation. So these two things, like the change in perspective and rotation on the x-axis, enhance each other, and they're really what's doing all the work. It's these two properties together. Okay, so next thing I want to do is remove all the overflow here. Like we have a bunch of stuff overflowing from the container. So I'll go to the container and give it an overflow of hidden. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to target the div that contains the 3 paragraphs and give it a position of absolute. And then we will be able to change the top property. And when we change the top property, it will make it look like the text is scrolling towards the top. So let's do that manually, and then we will create an animation that does that for us automatically. So first thing, I'll target the titles, and more specifically, the div that's inside of titles. Go to titles and give it a position of relative. And then I'll go to the div that's inside of titles and give it a position of absolute. And now I need to fix the titles height, because when I gave the div that's inside of titles a position of absolute, the height of titles went to 0. So I'll need to set a height manually. So I'll go for like 1000 pixels, for example. Okay. Okay, now let's see what happens when I change the top property of the div that's inside of titles. For example, I'll set it to, I don't know, 50%. And then I'll set it to 40%, for example. And then 30%. And you see how that makes up pretty much the animation that we want to achieve. I'll try a couple of values here, and then I'll tell you what the best values that I found are. Okay, so the values I found out were the div that's inside of titles should start at top 80%, which means it's not visible, and then start scrolling to the top by going, for example, to 70, 60, and all the way to negative 130, which will make it look like this. And then at this point, it should just fade away. So I'll start creating an animation that does exactly that. I'll set the top starting point at 80%, and this will make it not visible. I'll create a keyframe and call it crawl. Start at 0% with a top of 80% and end up at 100% with a top of negative 130%. And then I'll apply this animation crawl over how many seconds? I don't know, let's try 20 seconds, for example, linear. Let's see how that looks. Doesn't look too bad. You just want now that at the very end of the animation, it should fade away instead of just disappearing like this. So I'll add an opacity of 0 at 100% and an opacity of 1 at 0%. And let's see how that looks. So now, as you can see, it starts fading away too early. So we want to set another keyframe at 90% and give it an opacity of 1 at 90%. That means that it should hold the same opacity. It should be visible all the way to 90% of the animation and only start disappearing in the last 10% of the animation. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, so just at the very end, it starts disappearing. That's fine. Now, next thing I want to do is place a logo before the start of the animation. So I'll go inside my container and create an image element. And the source of the image is going to be my starwars.svg. And I'm going to resize it. I'll I'll remove the animation for now so we can work a little bit on the logo undisturbed. And I'll also position the logo inside of the container. So I'll give it a position of absolute, left 50% and top 50%. This should make it go to the center of the screen. Now I'll also have to translate to negative 50% and negative 50% because it's not centered exactly. So this will make it go exactly to the center of the screen. And then I need to apply an animation to this logo that will make it go from like very big to small over the span of, for example, 5 seconds or something. So I'll create another keyframe and call it zoom out. And I'll go from like at 0%, I'll make the logo scale. I'll transform and scale to 250%, for example. And at the end of the animation, it should end up with a transform scale of 10%. Like it should go from 250% to 10% over the span of 5 seconds. So I'll assign this animation to my image, and let's see over the span of 5 seconds, for example, linear. Okay, that's basically it, but at the moment it's not really going towards the center of the screen. And that's because in my zoom out keyframes, I should have added the translate minus 50% on the x-axis and minus 50% on the y-axis. At the moment this is being ignored, like this line of code is not doing anything. So I'll need to add like this to the transform which is in the animation itself. So let's see how it looks now. Okay, next thing I want to get back the crawl animation which I had commented so that I could work on the logo. And this is what happens when I reload the screen. At the moment we have both animations going on at the same time. So I'll add a delay of 5 seconds to my crawl animation. And this is done by, after like typing crawl 20-second linear, you can type another value and this value goes for the delay. So let's see how this works. So first of all, I have my logo. It goes smaller and smaller. And then you have the crawl that starts going towards the top of the screen. As you can see, another problem is that the logo is not disappearing. Okay, so we can fix this by giving the Star Wars logo an opacity of 0 or an opacity of 1 at the beginning of animation and have it fade towards an opacity of 0 by the end of the animation. So I'll do that by adding opacity of 1 at 0% of zoom out. And then I'll also add opacity of 0 at the end of zoom out. And since it's starting to fade too early, I'll also have to add a keyframe at, for example, I don't know, 80%, and also give it an opacity of 1 at 80% so that it doesn't start fading away until the very end of the logo animation. Okay, so it's still not working, and this is because I have to give the image itself, like by default, an opacity of 0, so that it's only visible while animating. Yeah, so this is more like it. The next thing I want to do is add something that's called text align justify that will make so that every line in every paragraph fills up the line until the end. And by doing something that's called text align justify, this will pretty much have every line of every paragraph fill its line completely by adding some extra spacing automatically. You will see how that looks. You see how you no longer have uneven line, like every line is filled up until the end. Last but not least, I want to change the font, like the font family. I'll go and pick up something that looks a little bit more like the Star Wars font. Okay, so I went back to the code pen where I took this tutorial from. So I'll be using the same font in our example over here. So I'll apply like a font family of news cycle. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Yeah, so pretty much this ends our tutorial right here. And I usually try to simplify a little bit, but the CodePen where I took this from also uses some JavaScript to start and end the animation, so I'll be linking it in case you wanna, of course, and to credit the original author of the work. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. I'll see you next time then. Bye bye.